I want to welcome you to the Let's Do Lent Transforming Lives with Small Group Ministry webinar. My name is Charlie Holt, and I'm the rector of St. Peter's Episcopal Church in Lake Mary, Florida, and the author of the Christian Life Trilogy. And I have with me Alan White, who is what I would call an expert in small group ministry and hosting small groups as well as leading large-scale campaigns. And he's done that in smaller churches as well as larger churches. And he's the author of Exponential Groups, Moving Beyond Your Limits. And I've known Alan for over 10 years as a friend and somebody who has mentored me in leading small group ministry in the life of our church. And I'm blessed to have you. So welcome, Alan.
Well, thanks, Charlie. And you're being very generous to call me the author, because at this point, I've only published the first chapter of that book, but I'm writing the rest of it. So eventually I'll be the legitimate author of the whole thing.
Well, we can't wait for that book to come out, but I think people can get that first chapter on your website, right? What's the name? What's your website?
It's Alan White, so ALLENWHITE.org. So AlanWhite.org.
Great.
And if you misspell my name, I don't guarantee what you're going to find, or necessarily approve of it.
Well, Alan and I first met on coaching calls just like this, actually, where Alan was coaching me on how to be a coordinator of small group campaigns in the life of our church at St. Peter's. And I've learned from him so many different things, so I'm really blessed to have him come teach us. And so the purpose of today's talk is really to look at what it looks like to have a church-wide small group campaign, to address some of the keys to making a small group campaign happen effectively. And the side piece of this webinar is where we hope that you'll take an interest in the Christian Life Trilogy, which is a small group program and curriculum that I've written that is designed with Anglican Church in mind, Episcopalian Church, liturgical churches. It's designed to align the heart of the church and the Christian faith with the heart of the church year. So it's the crucified life, the resurrected life, and the spirit-filled life is designed to be used at Lent, Easter season, and Pentecost season. So without any too much of promotion of that, what I'd like to do is ask Alan to just give us an idea of what you mean by a small group campaign. How would you define a church-wide small group campaign?
Sure. And it's interesting, too, Charlie. I was just thinking that it was exactly a year ago this week that we shot the Christian Life Trilogy at the Episcopal Church of St. Luke in Orlando, and over a couple of days. And it was, I mean, he did, 20 talks in 2 days. He did an amazing job. But, yeah, the importance of an alignment is that you're tying, you're taking what you learn on the weekend, on Sunday, and you're taking it into the week. Otherwise, most people, statistically, it's very sad for us that are pastors to think about this, but most people will forget about what we said within the first 24 to 48 hours. So by Tuesday, you asked them, what did the pastor talk about on Sunday? I know in my case, when I speak, all they remember is something stupid that I said. And so, and I know nobody else at this call has ever done that. But what this does is by tying the weekend with the week, it exposes them one more time to the topic at hand, as well as giving the ability to do what they can't do in a service. They can discuss it with other people, and then they can begin to plan out what are some practical applications, what are some changes I need to make, either in the way I think about things or my attitude towards things or my behavior. And by doing an alignment in this way, it really builds a lot of momentum, a lot of interest in the church, because most people in the congregation are interested in following what their senior pastor, what their priest is advocating.
Right. So the idea is to have your entire church basically thinking about and studying all of the same thing at the same time, using small groups and sermon alignment, and also a teaching that is thematic for the season or particular period in which your church year is. And this can be done actually with any curriculum. The first time I ever did a church-wide campaign was using Rick Warren's 40 Days of Purpose campaign, and I think a lot of churches really got introduced to the idea of a church-wide campaign with that 40 days of purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, it is the thing of the senior leader of the church giving direction and saying, hey, I want you to join us on this. There's a synergy that's unique about everybody studying the same thing, and whether it's in a group or in a class. It could be in a home. It could be at a coffee shop. I had a group that met on a commuter train once. And so they begin to think about, who's in my life that would, enjoy or benefit for something like this. The other need that it meets is, let's face it, people don't have the time on Sunday morning that they used to. And so the need to, grow people and disciple them used to be met in the Sunday school class or in a midweek service. And for some people, just busy schedules and all of that are, a little prohibitive to doing that. So if they're only attending on Sunday morning and the Sunday mornings that they do attend, then how are we discipling and growing our people? And so in that, I think by challenging them to gather together a group of friends or to host a group in their home of maybe people, some they know, some they don't know, we're adding to that ability to disciple people by they find a time that's convenient to them. And it seems like in this day and age, it's more smaller groups that we're tending to find. And that way, if you have people that they travel for business or they have hectic schedules, they need to move around their days of the week. If you have a dozen people, that may be a little more to do. But if you have 5 or 6 people, that may be a little more flexible and easier to do.
One of the things that I've noticed in my own church is that every single year we do Lent, and it just seems to happen every year, Lent. And we know it's coming, and we want to plan something. So that's a question. What are we going to do for Lent this year that both the pastor and the people of the church want to take something on for that particular period? And it's a perfect time to launch a small group program. One of the typical things, and we've done this at our church, is to have a midweek Lenten study of some kind at the church, and where I teach it, or we bring in an outside speaker to host the teaching. And this past Lent, what we decided to do was to do the Crucified Life from the Christian Life trilogy. And here's the difference that I think is so profound, is on a typical, and when we have a great speaker or a great teaching on Wednesday night for a Lenten, we might get 100 people to come and participate. But when we do a small group campaign, we actually had 40 different groups meeting around the city at different times, and we had 400 adults participating in studying the Crucified Life. And I think that to me is one of the biggest benefits of doing a small group campaign, is that it gets more people involved and gets more people being discipled in the process.
Well, and the interesting thing is, I absolutely do. And I think that, when you said you had 400 adults involved, if I remember right, you don't have 400 adults typically on Sunday, do you?
No, that's correct. I mean, we have an average Sunday of attendance of about 350. So we actually have, when we do a small group campaign at our church, we often have more people in small groups than we actually have attending church on a Sunday morning, which to me just is very exciting to me, because I see the growth and the life happening in the individual people's lives as so many people are getting involved and engaging in a study.
Yeah, no, and that's true. And you think about, too, just from a practical standpoint, that if you offer a midweek is great. I taught a midweek Bible study for many, many, many years. But if you say, we're going to have an offering, and it's going to be on Wednesday night, and it's going to be at 7 o'clock, then the choice is take it or leave it. But if you go with a small group, you could have a small group that meets Sunday afternoon. You could have a small group that meets any night of the week. You have a small group that meets early in the morning. I started a small group 8 years ago. It was a men's group. And we met for lunch because, everybody eats lunch. Now, I would have rather had a breakfast group, because at breakfast, nobody's running late yet. Sometimes lunch, you're running late. But there's a lot of flexibility to that. And I've seen over the years, amazing things. Somebody came up and said, hey, I've got 3 friends. We meet every Thursday morning at Starbucks. We do a study. I said, sure. I had a guy that wanted the second set of curriculum to do the study with the guys he worked with at a GM dealership. I even had a group at one point, they met on a commuter train. And rather than sitting there drinking their coffee and reading the newspaper, they had a Bible study once a week on the commuter train on the way to work. So there are a lot of possibilities with this.
We actually had a small group meeting in Zephyr Hills Prison, and there was no way those guys were going to make it to our midweek program. But
That's
we could
true.
send small group materials in, and they could do the study along with us. And there were 40 men who participated in the Christian Life Trilogy in Zephyr Hills Prison. I was blown away by that.
And just to point out that Father Charlie did not ask other members of his church to join the group at Zephyr Hills, right?
That's right. we were connected with the chaplain there. So let's advance. The next slide is what is it? What are the goals that are realistic to set when you're thinking about a small group campaign?
Yeah, I think that with this, what I like about the trilogy is that it's 3 parts, and so this is unique to your series, but it's also something that we advocate with all the churches we work with, and we work with everyone from, we worked with one of the largest Catholic churches in the United States, Baptist, Lutheran, Presbyterian, Methodist, Pentecostal churches. We run the whole gamut. Now, half people just hung up because I said that. But in all of that, typically what you want to see, and of course, Charlie, you are an overachiever at this, but what you want to see is the first time out, about 50% of your people connected in groups, especially if you've never really done groups before, because you're going to get your early adopters, you're going to get your early mid adopters. You may do better than that. And if you do better than that, I'm not going to cry about it. The second time around, we're going to add to that, and we're maybe going to get another 25% to get to about 50%, and then the third time around, we can even go beyond that. But the great thing about a series is that, some of your mid adopters, they're going to sit back, they're going to wait, they're going to watch people go through Lent and do the crucified life. They're going to make sure nothing bad happened and that nobody died. And then they go, well, you know what? That was okay. So I'm going to do the resurrected life because resurrection sounds better than crucifixion to me. So they're going to jump on the second one. But here's the best part of it, is that if they'll do the first 2 studies back to back, then as a group, you can count on them to go forward, that they're well established as a group and they're going to continue. And then to get them into the Spirit-filled life, which we're not recommending starting it at Pentecost, right? We're talking about that would be the following fall. Is that how you guys are doing that?
We had 40 churches do the Christian Life Trilogy this past year, and all of them waited until the fall to do the Spirit-filled life. And so we're actually at our church launching the Spirit-filled life in September. And I think that's right, because after meeting for 2 small group series in a row, people were kind of ready for a break. And summertime hit and vacation schedule. And summertime is often called the black hole of small group ministry. I think it's possible to have small groups during the summertime, but it is one of those more challenging times to launch a small group campaign.
Yeah, and the thing is that if you know that it's going to take a certain amount of leadership credits in the bank to get people to launch something, summertime is not the best time to spend those credits. You can certainly encourage them to doing more group life kinds of things, to get together, have a barbecue, have a social event as a group, do a service project, maybe even have like a neighborhood block party, invite people in that would eventually join the group. But I don't fight that season either. I think fall is a great time to do that third one. And the truth is, as long as in the middle of the resurrected life, they understand that whether it's the second Sunday in September or the second Sunday in October, that there's going to be another study called the Spirit-filled life. If they've planned on that, then they'll go ahead and follow that, even though they've had a few months that they've taken off for meetings.
Right. One of the things that I believe, and I've seen this happen at our own church, is I think it's possible for any church, whether that's a church that has an average Sunday attendance of 100 or 50, or whether it's a church that has an average Sunday attendance of, say, 300 or even in the thousands, I think it's possible for any church to get to 100% of their average Sunday attendance in small groups. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I mean, and it's been amazing to see some of the results. I was just talking to a church yesterday. They're a very large church in San Diego, and they're not 300. In fact, they're ordering 40,000 copies of their study guide for their fall launch.
Wow.
Now, they haven't recruited anybody yet, but they're ordering a lot of books. But I've seen, churches of 2,500 with, one that we worked with in Washington State that has 500 small groups right now. I saw a church in New Hampshire of 400. They started 50 small groups. And so it's been really interesting, again, across denominational lines in all regions of the country to see these responses. One church, a Lutheran church out in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, that is about 300 on the weekend, and they got all of their people and then some connected into a 3-part series similar to what you're describing, Charlie. And what they found was they didn't lose a whole lot of people. In fact, they only lost one group between the first and second series, but then they added numerically to the groups that they already had. And then that church now is coming back, and we're helping them develop 2 projects for the coming year, one for this fall based on the lectionary, and then one for Lent next year. I should just have them do this series and not talk about doing their own. But anyway, the fall was a little risky because the lectionary sometimes doesn't. You don't always have the right topics to do a series.
Well, the church year does provide these particular sections or seasons, and I think Lent is a great time to do a small group series. The Easter season is also a great time if Easter comes early, and it is next year. One of the things that we're going to be doing next year is we'll use Christmas Eve services to leverage and promote and talk to a lot of different people about the small group campaign that we'll do in Lent. And then we'll use the Easter Day services to encourage people to take the next series. So that those big celebration times are a great time to cast vision. Let's talk a little bit about, as you're preparing and planning for launching a small group campaign, I use the time, talent, and treasure in stewardship, and I think the stewardship of the church's resources as church leaders is critically important too. How much time does it take to really plan a successful churchwide campaign, and what kind of timing should people be thinking about?
Well, I think that's an important question because obviously we all have a limited amount of time, and so to think of, I'm going to add something extra, and I know that when churches tend to be smaller, the workload tends to be heavier. I worked at a church that grew from 85 people to 1,500 and had various roles during all of those stages, so I do understand that. But time-wise, part of it depends on how you do things. In fact, I think that if you put the responsibility on the person who's leading the group to invite their friends and families and neighbors to join them in the group, then you don't have to worry so much about how do I get all of my people connected into a group. Or if you need to have a connection, you just arrange an event where people come and sign up. You may worry about how do I recruit all these people? Well, again, by taking 3 weeks prior to the start of the Lenten season and giving people, plenty of advance notice and inviting them to come in and to host one of these groups, again, it's not a difficult thing. The work comes in is laying the groundwork of finding some mature people in the congregation that can follow up on people that have never led a group before. Obviously, the plan, ordering materials and those sorts of things. But I would say for a typical campaign, we used to hand out a handbook that was 200 pages and people got it and they were completely overwhelmed. And I think for the handbook that we've designed for this campaign, it's much more streamlined. We're down to 50 pages of kind of essential things. But I think it's beginning to think about team members, beginning to think about people that will help you to promote, help you to coordinate communication, some of these kinds of things. If you have a solid 6 to 10 weeks ahead of time, then you would be more than prepared for what you need to do.
I kind of think of planning in terms of 3 phases, and as I look at it in pastoring our church, and this, this goes for any small group campaign that we ever have launched. But we always typically follow 3 phases. The first phase is I recruit a leadership team, and that leadership team helps me to not only plan all the details of the small group program and campaign, but then they can help recruit new members to be hosting small groups. And so I'll take a month of building that leadership team, a month to recruit hosts to host a small group, and then a month to recruit participants to be in the small groups. And sometimes we don't have 3 months notice. Sometimes we only have 2 months, and that'll be the case this fall. So we'll just condense that. But I think for larger churches, you may even have to plan that even more in advance, or maybe less. But the key is those 3 phases of building a leadership team, building a group of hosts to host the small groups, and then giving that plenty of time for people to arrange their schedule to participate in a small group. I think those are the 3 phases that I think about when I think about time.
Yeah, no, that's very, very good. And I think, finding a team of people that you can rely on, people that maybe are not able to serve on an ongoing basis, but they can serve on a seasonal basis or can help you with a project. You want to find those people that are always saying, I'm so busy, and just say, you know what, I'm not going to ask you to do something for 12 months of the year, but if you can help me in the 6 weeks leading up to this, it would be greatly appreciated, and I'll give you the rest of the year off. Maybe not say that.
As a pastor, I'm always trying to make sure I have one person that is sort of the coordinator. I call him the campaign champion for the small group series, that can help be an administrator, so to speak, and keep everything going, because part of pastoral life is you get pulled in a million different directions and you have a lot of different demands on your time and schedule. So I always am looking for a good campaign champion. So what would you say makes up the qualities of that kind of a person?
I think you want to find someone who is organized, they're detail-oriented, they're going to be able to, even somebody that's going to prompt you as the pastor of moving things forward, or we need to have a meeting, we need to do a check-in, and kind of let's talk about these aspects of the campaign. The other thing that does is it allows an opportunity for people that have those gifts maybe to use them in a different way than they've typically been using those gifts in the past. And so that does provide a really good opportunity. But I would definitely say you need that campaign champion, and don't try to do this by yourself. The other thing that's important is that when you're choosing a campaign champion, you want that detailed, organized person. You also want to find somebody that you get along with well, that you want to meet with, because if they're nitpicky and hard to deal with, that is a meeting that you're going to dread every time it's on your calendar.
Well, and if they're the campaign champion, they're going to have to deal with a lot more people besides you. So they need to be a people person. I think that's critically important. So an administrator, somebody who's got those gifts, good with people, and I think somebody that really is on fire for the vision of whatever campaign, and really believes in the value of small group ministry as well. What are when you're building a leadership team, Alan, what are some of the different roles that you like to make sure that you have?
Yeah, I think to obviously find that the champion is going to kind of be the point person for the whole thing. Find someone who can lead a prayer team, and maybe your church already has a prayer team, and so that prayer coordinator would be somebody that you already have in a prayer ministry. You just have them help you with this. I think to find somebody that's going to help you with communications and promotion, and that may be 2 separate roles. And again, that's going to coordinate with the staff and is going to help kind of make sure that things happen when they're supposed to happen, make sure that things are on message when they need to be. And then just to have someone for administrative support. Now, I don't go overboard on databases and record keeping, but I know that it's different in various churches. And sometimes there's some software tools that make it easy, or some websites that make it easy. Sometimes it's as simple as sending a survey out to your group leaders and finding out who's participated in their group so far once they've gotten a couple weeks into it. But it's good to have, these kinds of administrative support, and then to find, mature believers that would be willing to help coach some of the new leaders. They don't necessarily need to have a lot of expertise or experience in leading small groups, but to be able to just call that person, encourage them, because inevitably what happens is somebody starts inviting their friends, and they say, well, you call and ask, how's it going? And they say, well, I invited 5 people, and 2 of them said they already got invited to another group, and 2 of them can't do the night of the week that I'm having my group, and the other one said they're not really my friend. And so what do you do with that? Well, you have an experienced leader that says, you know what, that happens to everybody, so don't worry about that. Let's pray about who God wants to have in your group, and before you know it, that person's got a group and they're going strong.
Great. I think one of the things that I've been asked many times is when you have a smaller church, is it really necessary to build a leadership team? And my answer, and maybe you might have a different answer, but my answer always is yes, absolutely, because when you have that leadership team, you automatically have a group of people who are excited and see the vision and will be hosting a group, hopefully. Everybody on the leadership team will host a group. And so right out of the gate, you might have 3 or 4 potential small groups. Now, you may not need as large of a leadership team as a big church has, but I think it's really fruitful to have that kind of a group.
Yeah, and again, it's more opportunities to serve. I would say a smaller church needs a leadership team more than a larger church does. Like I said, I was at the church in California that grew from 85 to 1,500. But then when I moved here to Greenville, South Carolina, I was at a church of 6,500. Well, I had a leadership team, and they worked for me, and they were going to do their job if they wanted to have their check. And then the other side of that was we had a pastor that was in charge of care, and his full-time job was hospital visits, funerals, and weddings, and that's all he did, but he handled all of that for the church, and it was his full-time job. Now, most churches, and probably most of you on the call, do not have a staff person. You would long for a staff person to do those sorts of things. You probably don't have that, and it still falls back on you or your other staff. And so in that case, take something else on. You want to be prepared. And some of you have probably already thought of, oh, I know the exact person that's going to help, that's organized, they're friendly, they're going to help me get this thing together, and then find a couple other people, and then that's your team, and then move forward from there. The main thing with this is we don't want to oversimplify it because it's important, but we don't want to overcomplicate it either. And I think you have 3 solid weeks of promotion. You've undergirded all of that with prayer, and then you're ready to go. And it shouldn't be too hard. Have some people help distribute materials. Ask the people that are hosting a group to invite people they know. Place the few people that can't figure out what group to go into a group, and you'll have a great series.
One of the things about small groups that I love is that you really get to see people using their gifts and the spiritual gifts that God's given them. When you think about recruiting people to actually be the host and the person leading a small group in their home, is there a particular set of spiritual gifts that you're looking for that kind of person?
I think you're really looking for people who are warm relationally. So you're not necessarily looking for teachers. So if you have people with teaching gifts, then they're going to do all the talking. But you want to find people that are, they're going to lead. They're going to, delegate responsibilities to other members of the group. And maybe they're not going to lead the discussion every week either. And but you want to find people that are warm relationally, that are going to be able to attract other people to them, and get a group started. And it may sound a bit Darwinian, but what I found is if people have the stuff to gather a group, they also have the stuff to keep that group going. But the people that come to you and say, I'd like to do a group, would you give me a group? That's usually a sign they probably have a teaching gift, and they're asking, would you give me a class to teach? But it also says that maybe they don't quite have the stuff to get that group together. Maybe I'm being terrible and shouldn't say things like that at all, Charlie.
No, I think that's awesome. I've seen that where somebody has a strong teaching gift, but they are not necessarily a great small group facilitator, because they want to start slipping into that into that role. And one of the great things about so many of the small group curriculums out there, including this one that we're hoping you'll take a look at, the Christian Life Trilogy, is that the teaching is taken care of by the video and the DVD in this case. And so you don't have to be a teacher in order to have a small group. In fact, I'm of the belief that people have the gift of hospitality much more prominently than they do the gift of teaching out there in the body of Christ, and that the Lord has just naturally created all these small group leaders who do a wonderful time, or who do a wonderful job of having people in their homes and being a host and hospitable, but they would shrivel up and be really scared if you had asked them to step out in front of a group of people and give a talk or to teach a lesson. But that they don't have to do that, and that's one of the wonderful things about being a small group host. You just have to be a host.
Well, especially if you've invited your friends, and then if you've never done it and you mess up, well, they're still your friends. They may kid you a little bit, but they're still there. And let me just qualify. If a person has strong teaching gifts and they want to lead the group, it is possible. But they've got to rein that teaching gift in, and they've got to bite their tongue and let other people answer and facilitate that discussion, because it is a different style. Because we see materials like this work very well in Sunday school classes and other kinds of groups that maybe are more formal in their approach. They just have to switch up their approach a little bit when they get into a series like this.
That's good. Now, if you're listening on the webinar, you can ask a question by, there's a way to raise your hand, or you can type a question in the chat if there's a question that you might have. One of the things that I want to encourage you to look at is the ChristianLifeTrilogy.com website to learn more about the particular curriculum that is designed for Lent. The wonderful thing about this curriculum is that it fits with the church year, and so that alignment that we were talking about at the beginning of the call, where you have sermon alignment, what people are studying in the small groups, also aligns with the church year, with Lent and Easter and the Pentecost season. One of the things that I'm offering for those who participated in the call and have learned about this is we do have a campaign kit that has training videos on there. It has a sample of all the different aspects of the curriculum. There's a devotional book, study guide, and the DVDs that go with each of the 3 parts of the series. And I'm giving a coupon code for this webinar of Lent 16, and that'll take $50 off the cost of that campaign kit. So, are there any questions out there that you might have as you've been listening to the call?
So, Charlie, while we're waiting for questions, I'll ask you a question.
Okay.
And that is, out of the 40 churches that have piloted this, did the members of the groups pay for their curriculum, or did the church provide that for them?
That's a good question, and we had churches do it in a couple of different ways. One of the churches actually gave all of the participants the materials, so they had budgeted enough money to provide both a study guide, study guide and a DVD to each participant. Our church, what we did was we asked participants to contribute money back, and so we asked for $20 to participate in the course. And the nice thing about that is people had an investment in the program, and the actual cost to the church was minimized because most people did contribute something back. But we always said to the participants, don't let money prevent you from participating. We want you to do it. And so the church offered generous scholarships, and some people needed that.
And you think about it, $20 for most people is a good cup of coffee. So I think that's what Starbucks is now, $20, right?
Not where do you live?
Maybe it's 3 or 4 cups of coffee. No, I mean, relatively speaking.
Yeah, and it's a great question though, because and I think the nice thing about planning ahead of time, and so part of the reason why we're having these seminars in July and August and so on, is so that people can begin to think about budgetary considerations if they're going to be thinking about this for their church.
Yeah, that's a very important thing. And again, you can offset the cost if you have someone that, $20 is, they're a single mom and, they're barely making it, or somebody's out of a job or whatever, then you can certainly absorb that cost. But for most people, that's not going to be the end of the world.
That's right. And one of the neat things that happened at our church is when we launched the program, and we had what was called a host rally, and we invited all the people who were hosting a group. So that was 40 different sets of households that were coming to this host rally, and we put on a nice evening. And we had a gentleman there who was so excited about the program that he said, if anybody can't afford to pay, I will make up the difference. And he wrote a $2,000 check midway through the program. And so there actually, for our church, was no cost to our church once we had received people's reimbursements and that donation from that person that was excited about it. Any questions from any of the attendees?
Well, I'm not seeing any hands go up. Okay, well, so I'm going to ask you all the hard questions now.
Okay.
Okay, so you have 400 people in groups,
Mm-hmm.
And you have all of these groups going. How much trouble did this cause? How many weirdos did you have that were leading these groups that you had to later go and shut down, or send them to the group in prison? What did that look like?
We did not have too many. I mean, small group ministries, one of the challenges of small group ministry is that you might end up with somebody hosting a small group that is really not qualified to do that. Or you might end up with somebody in a small group that causes some difficulties or challenges. I think Rick Warren's the one that coined the phrase extra grace required, that there are people that need a little extra grace in the way that we relate to them. And I think those are the moments where we actually become the body of Christ. And that when we have difficulties in our relationships, that's a great opportunity for us to learn about each other, to learn about using the accountability structure of the church. So you might have to involve the pastor. But more often than not, I've found that when we have those kind of difficult moments and we navigate through them with grace, things actually come out relationally better for the church. As we take those moments seriously and pray through them and navigate through them with grace.
How do you feel? I found over the years, in churches I've worked in, we've launched, hundreds of groups at a time, and now churches that I'm coaching, thousands of groups at a time. And what I find is the problems are usually less than 2%. And sometimes you just have to have a conversation about people. Maybe it's a lifestyle issue, maybe it's something else that's come up, and you just have a pastoral conversation with them. But by and large, I mean, if you survey churches, I was just looking at a survey of a church today, and the average person at the church had been a Christian for over 40 years. And so if you figure that number of people in a church, our church, it was over 20 years, but if they've been a believer for that length of time, if they've attended, somewhat regularly, they have a pretty clear understanding of things. And they're not going to go off the deep end. They're not going to go off on, they're going to follow right along with the curriculum. But, overall for a church, we've seen a series like this increase the weekly attendance because they want to be in on, they're studying this every week. They want to be there on the weekend. We've seen it increase overall serving, both Stetzer in his transformational groups as well as Wuthnow in his research have shown that people that are in groups tend to serve more, they tend to give more, and there are a lot of things, and this has all been, documented. There's a church we're working with outside of Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and they've seen in the last, they did a January series and then the series after Easter, so kind of the same time frame you're talking about, and actually they started on the Super Bowl, anyway, but those two series, their attendance has increased noticeably, and their giving has increased noticeably in that congregation, and they're kind of floored by something as a simple idea of having, these aligned series with the curriculum and then getting their people involved. Because part of it is that in any size church, people want to feel connected and they want to feel loved. And a group is a good place for that to happen. And if they're feeling connected and loved, if they're somebody that's hosting a group and they're feeling like I'm important to this and my church wants me to be involved in this, then all of a sudden those felt needs are met, and people's responsiveness then to the church, begin to go up. The other cool thing we saw was actually people inviting their friends and neighbors, coworkers that had never darkened the door of our church, and yet they were interested in the series. They were interested about spiritual things. People, as secular as our society is becoming, people are interested in spiritual things, and especially things that, when times are a bit tumultuous, things that are going to anchor them. And so when they're invited to do this, and they're not going to a church, they're going to their friend's house, so that's a comfortable place. I've even seen where they've been invited to church on Sunday, and then it doesn't seem so foreign to them because they feel like they're already a part of it before they've even come to church for the first time.
That's right. If you walk into a typical church and you don't know anybody in this big group of people, it's actually quite uncomfortable. But if you start in a small group, and then your second step is to attend the Sunday morning worship service, it's much easier for that person because they know they have somebody to sit by. They have people that they know there, and I completely agree with that. And the nice thing about a small group is I actually think it's easier for people to cross the threshold of a home than it is to cross the threshold of a church building, and especially when it's somebody that's their friend or their neighbor or coworker that they have a personal relationship with, and that person invites them into their home. It's a very effective way to do outreach and evangelism and reach people with the gospel. I want to remind our attendees that you can ask a question if you want to. The other thing that we're going to be doing, Teresa Summerlin, who is our Director of Church Relations, is going to reach out to those who have participated in the call and registered for the webinar, and get your mailing address to send you a copy of the Crucified Life Study Guide so that you can have that to preview and look. And we're going to give that to you for free. So I want to get that in the mail to you, but you do need to respond to Teresa and give her that address information.
One more thing I wanted to add to forming groups, Charlie. I interrupted you. I apologize. I'll keep it short.
No, go ahead.
One of the objections people have to small groups is that they already have friends, people that are well established in the community. We've seen this in places like Baltimore and some of the suburbs of Chicago and various places, that people that have lived there their entire lives. And so you say, hey, come join a small group. They're like, well, why do I need a small group? I already have my friends, and if I join a small group, I'm not going to have time to spend with my friends because it's all going to the small group. And so my solution to that is to merge those two things together and have them gather together with their friends, but to do something intentional about their spiritual growth. And if the friends are, far from God, maybe it's an opportunity, to reach them. But it's also a good way to form groups because essentially they're really already a group. They're just not formally called a group. But we give them a curriculum, give them something intentional to do about their spiritual growth, and then you don't have to worry about, oh, the church has, we've got 400 sign-up cards. We've got to place all these people into groups. Get out of that business. Don't even enter into that business. Have people invite their friends and neighbors and coworkers, and the people that can't find a group, we'll figure out a way to get them in a group.
I think that's a critically important point because we always recruit small group hosts, and to me, if I know that if I can get 35 or 40 different small group hosts, that those 35 or 40 households will go out and find all the other people to be a part of it. And so that, to me, that is a critical point. We don't have to go out and find the 400. We have to find the 40. And the 40 goes out and recruits people that are already in their lives, people they already know and have a relationship with, and it's not hard to do that. What do you think is an ideal size of a small group?
You know, it really depends. I always thought an ideal small group was 12 because that's what Jesus had. But then Jesus had Judas, so maybe the ideal size was 11. But then I took a class in seminary, and they said that a small group was 3 to 30 people. And I thought, well, that's ridiculous. 3 is too small, 30 is too big. Now, after more than a decade of coaching other churches, I've kind of arrived to an ideal small group is anywhere from 3 to 30. Who knew? And part of that is if you have people that are more introverted, it's not that they have friends and they want to do a group. They just don't want 12 strangers to show up at their house. But they could invite 3 or 4 of their friends that they already have a relationship with and be a small group. So on the smaller side, that works. So people that travel a lot, you kind of need that. Then there are other people, they've never met a stranger, and they'll invite everybody. They'll invite their whole neighborhood. And I thought, well, that's kind of greedy that they would, take 20, 25 people to be in their group. We need to put a lid on that and give some other people a chance. But then I discovered that some people just have a wonderful ability to do that. And I had one leader come up to me and they said, we have 25 people in our group. Is that okay? I said, well, tell me how you're doing it. They said, well, we're all crowding in and watching the video, and then we're subgrouping into 2 different groups to have the discussion. I said, I think that's fine. And they looked at me, they said, really? I said, yeah, come talk to me when you get to 35. And so I think the main thing is when you have a large group, in fact, when you have more than 8, you need to subgroup for the discussion and especially for the prayer time because everybody needs to get their word in. I have this opinion, it hasn't been verified yet, but I think in any group of people, 3 people talk. So if it's a group of 30, 3 people are going to talk. If it's a group of 12, 3 people are going to talk. If it's a group of 3, 3 people are going to talk, which is better. So I think if you have a larger group, you subdivide into different areas of the house, and if they don't know, who should lead the subgroup, just say, hey, whoever in this is a smaller group who's had the most speeding tickets, you lead the discussion, because those are the risk takers. So you just put them in charge.
That's good. I like it. What is the key to sustaining small groups beyond a particular small group campaign?
Yeah, the big thing is having a next step, and that's what I like about the Christian Life Trilogy, is that in the middle of the series that they're in, especially if they're a new group, you want to offer them one option for a next step as far as a curriculum goes. Because if you send them to a Bible bookstore or they go online in christianbooks.com, which is a great website, but they'll become so overwhelmed by the number of choices that the group will falter before they made a decision. So the decision we want them to make while they're in the current study is whether or not the group's going to continue. So in the middle of the crucified life on week 3 or 4, you would say to the group, oh, by the way, we're going to offer the resurrected life following Easter. And so before the crucified life study ends, we want a commitment from the group as to whether or not they're going to continue. And then in the middle of the resurrected life, we're going to offer, beginning of May, we're going to say, oh, by the way, we're going to offer another study called the Spirit-Filled Life, and it's going to start the second week in September. And you think, oh, man, there used to be 3 reasons I didn't start groups after Easter. Those reasons were June, July, and August. But if they have a next step and they have something to look forward to, I've seen even new groups, I've seen 80% of them start in the spring and be right there ready to go in the fall for the study because you gave them something to look forward to. So you really want to narrow the choice down to whether or not they're going to continue, not if we're going to continue and what are we going to study and where are we going to meet and. You just want to keep it to one question, are you going to continue, and have them make that decision before the series ends.
In my own personal small group experience, we've often found that we'll have a big launch and we'll get a large group in our home where maybe we have 12 people, and then we'll have some people that'll drop out of the group, but maybe 2/3 of the group sticks with it. What we experienced is it's that second series that we do that actually the group becomes really gelled and a really sweet time. And we kind of lost some of the uncommitted folks to the group, and the group relaxes and becomes a much stronger and deeper spiritual experience, just going through the transition from the first to the second small group study.
Yeah, and I would say even if ideally you want a group of 12 or maybe 11, that you would recruit maybe 16 people, knowing that there's going to be a little bit of atrophy there and a few people that aren't going to be able to continue. They had good intentions, but they couldn't make it. But you might want to start a little bit larger. There's also an opportunity, of course, at the beginning of every new series to invite a few others. But I do agree with you, Charlie. There is something about getting through the first series and then going into the second one that you begin to feel like, we're a group. We've spent time together for the last, 6-8 weeks, and now we're really feeling that kind of, family feeling that you want in a small group.
Yeah, and I also think the transition moments when a person or when a group has a break after a series, so you've done 7 weeks, that's actually a great time to shuffle the deck a little bit too. And maybe somebody in a small group might decide to host their own group. Maybe their schedule changes and they can't be in that group, but they can switch to a different group, or maybe the chemistry in a particular group doesn't work out for them. And so those transitions to the new series actually provide an opportunity for people to find a group that fits better for their needs and what they're needing in their relationships.
Yeah, and I definitely agree with that. I like the idea. I mean, I don't know that you planned it this way of doing a trilogy because of the sociological aspect of it, but it certainly makes sense with the seasons, and it makes sense with how groups are formed and how they're sustained. And I will say, Charlie, on a personal note, that a year ago when we were at the cathedral in Orlando shooting this, that the members of our crew that were there, our production crew that were operating cameras and working in various capacities over those couple of days, that there were times that I would see a tear in an eye, or they would come to me after a session, and they were truly moved by the teaching in this series as it was being filmed. And so I just want to encourage people that this has a real impact. If they get that starter kit and they take a look at it, I don't think they're going to be disappointed, even if they just had that and started one group. But you and I both know that this could really multiply and go well beyond what people would imagine.
Well, and the kind of testimonies that we've heard have just been amazing, of people's lives that have been changed and worked through these materials as they've worked through them. People that have reconciled with relatives through the challenge to forgive, people that have dealt with healing issues in their life, family of origin issues. There's so much fruit that's being born through the different churches that have participated, and it's been a blessing for me to be able to see and hear those testimonies as people share that with me. Well, that's about all the time that we have, and I really want to thank you, Alan, for being a part of this, and thanks for sharing your wisdom and your thoughts. Again, there's the ChristianLifeTrilogy.com website is a great website that we want to encourage you to go to check out the materials. There's a way for you to preview the first session of all 3 sessions there, and I also want to encourage you to check out the campaign kit. And remember that coupon code of Lent 16 with the all lowercase LENT 16 will give you $50 off that campaign kit. So thank you so much, Alan, and for those who participated on this call. And I hope this is a real blessing, and that many churches will be using these materials. But even if you don't use the Christian Life Trilogy materials, that you'll do some kind of small group campaign for Lent, because it is a tremendous way to reach people for the gospel.